It's good to speak with you again. Today was overcast for the majority of the day, and around the evening it started pouring outside. The weather made for horrible driving, but great relaxation. Today we'll be covering some of the attempts at sexual utopia throughout history. At least 2 attempts or so we'll cover in this workshop on today. I would like to reflect on some of the sexual tendencies of famed free thinkers and writers as well. Harold Nicholson, H.G. Wells, Simone de Beauvoir, and Edna St. Vincent Millay, if we have the time. Now, we are still in the 4th chapter of The Ethical Slut. This section, or rather series, will be a multi-part one as well. I feel that there's far too much information in each separate topic that's useful to just gloss over it so quickly without a little more of an in-depth look into them. And to be honest, it makes for interesting content. Throughout history, many great and not so great minds have attempted to create a sexual utopia. Whether each of these persons' attempt to do so had good, in quotations, intentions, is still left to be answered. Many of these attempts, if not all of them, eventually failed for one reason or another. That being said, it seems the recurring catalyst seems to be the ones outside of the artificial utopia. The Juanita community was founded by John Murphy Noyes in 1848 in Juanita, New York. It was a perfectionist communal societal attempt, one in which the populace there would share all of the things within the community. These things typically include food, property, shelter, work, parenting, sex, and love. Now, the community was a religious one. They believed that Jesus had actually already returned in 70 AD, making it possible for them to bring about Jesus' millennial kingdom themselves. Do that and be free of sin and perfect in this world, not just heaven. And this is a belief called perfectionism. The Juanita community practiced communalism in the sense of communal property and possessions. They also practiced complex marriage and male continence, mutual criticism, and ascending fellowship. Now, these things at first glance seem more than reasonable. A community that shares everything and eliminates jealousy, possession, and greed, it almost seems too good to be true. The Juanita community believed strongly in a system of free love known as complex marriage, where any member was free to have sex with any other who consented. Noyes believed that complex marriage would move the community beyond divisive commitments to a single partner or family. All the men were thought to be linked in divine marriage to all the women. Possessiveness and exclusive relationships were frowned upon. The community practiced coitus reservatus, or male continence, that is, intercourse without ejaculation. Children were raised communally and did not live with their parents. So a few topics within that, because I did have to dig and do a bit of research, and on the topic of ascending fellowship, women over the age of 40 were to act as sexual mentors to adolescent boys, as these relationships had minimal chances of conceiving. Furthermore, these women became religious role models for the young men. Likewise, older men often introduced young women to sex. Noyes often used his own judgment in determining the partnerships that would form, and would often encourage relationships between the non-devout and the devout in the community, in the hopes that the attitudes and behaviors of the devout would influence the non-devout. So a few points of interest, notably the age gap when it came to sexual intercourse. How old were you when you first had sex, and do you remember how it was? Consensual sex, that is. On one hand, many could find offense to this, being that it could be seen as statutory rape, and 2/3 of women do experience rape. They do experience molestation. They do experience being touched inappropriately, and 1/3 of men as well. Someone who's older taking advantage of someone who's younger and inexperienced. So then I'd ask you this. then once come, no pun intended, their experience. Would you rather consensually someone who has no sexual experience, male or female, attempting sexual methodology on someone and hurting them because they don't understand anything about sex? Or what if they hurt that person because they don't understand anything about sex? How is a young girl, a woman, supposed to be properly pleasured by someone who doesn't even know of the existence of the clitoris? How is a young man supposed to find pleasure from someone who doesn't know of the frenulum under the head of the penis? Logically, it makes sense to have someone with more experience teach someone with less experience to participate in such things. Now, to make things abundantly clear, I'm not advocating for statutory rape or sex between two persons or more who are not within the realm of legality when it comes to age. I'm merely empathizing and using logic. I can tell you now my first sexual experience was not at all pleasurable, and I'm sure doubly or rather triply so for my partner. We were young, didn't know a thing, so the internet was our teacher, and barely then. Everyone was too bashful or ashamed to speak about sex candidly with us, though we wanted that conversation. We needed it. I didn't even know the anatomy of a vagina until I was a junior in high school. I didn't know of the clitoris until after high school. Would I have appreciated someone a bit older and with more experience showing me how to properly pleasure this person whom I loved at the time? Absolutely. Without a doubt. Is this politically or morally correct? Who knows? Sex doesn't seem to have an age on it. It only has the rush. The rush of endorphins, chemicals, hormones, perspiration and butterflies. The rush of the blood to the penile shaft and down the labium minus. The mucus secretion from every orifice in and on your body. I can tell you from personal experience that one of the most wonderful feelings is the knowledge that you've properly pleasured your partner, that you've made them feel good. The confidence that comes from that is something almost indescribable. And we wonder why many of our youth and young adults, middle-aged and older peoples, walk around with no confidence, no fervor, no sexual power. If youth knew more about sex at a younger age, would it help them and help society in identifying rape? Identifying when someone has crossed the line? Because if they have no knowledge of the lines on their own body, how can you expect them to know what rape is? How can you expect them to draw the line when they don't even know their own? How to tell someone what happened, how to describe it properly. The flip side to that is if you give people an inch, they undoubtedly will take a mile. So at what age is proper to introduce a child to sex, and in reality to their own body? These are not answers that I have, but it would do you well to reflect on this and think about how you will help your children protect themselves. My suggestion is to arm them with knowledge. The community lasted until John Humphreys Noyes attempted to pass the leadership thereof to his son, Theodore Noyes. This move was unsuccessful because Theodore was an agnostic and lacked his father's talent for leadership. The move also divided the community, as communitarian John Towner attempted to take control for himself. Now, within the commune, there was a debate about when children should be initiated into sex, and by whom. There was also much debate about its practices as a whole. The founding members of the commune were aging or deceased, and many of the younger communitarians desired to enter into exclusive traditional marriages. Now, this was one example of a failed sexually liberated community. Unlike the Charista community, which seemed to be more stable as a whole with ideals that are pure enough to convince anyone to get on board, given they have an open enough mind. Charista was a utopian community that was started in New York in 1956 by John Peltz Pressment. Throughout much of its history, Charista was centered on the ideals of polyfidelity and creation of intentional communities. Charista underwent several incarnations that later became known as the Old Tribe, which was associated with a fairly large but fluid membership. In much of that era, Old Tribe Charistans were involved in swinging, or what they called polyintimacy, and was later renamed polyamory. The New Tribe, a period of more stable membership and ideology, began in 1971, based in the Hyde-Ashbury district of San Francisco. Now, to be honest with you, I didn't know what intentional communities were until I looked up the exact definition. From the context clues, the definition kind of gave itself away, but I did want to be sure. Intentional communities were communities designed specifically for high cohesion and functionality. They usually follow a, for now, alternative lifestyle. Generally, they all have something in common as well, whether it be some spiritual beliefs, political, social, or religious. Charista's cohesion were the 84 standards, and a few of them are as follows. Total rationality at all times. Search for truth through the elimination of contradictions. No jealousy, no anger, no rivalry, no sexism. No ageism, no racism, no classism, no duplicity, no alienation, no profanity, and no flippancy. These rules seem reasonable. Social tolerance, equality, verbality. Participatory democracy, accountability. Conviviality, graceful distancing. Positive attitude towards the toggle switch mode of decision making. And there is one and only one objective reality. To me, these seem very inclusive, more inclusive than the majority of politics and primitive groupthink that we have today. The group followed loosely the concept of Gestalt, which is essentially a euphemism for being aligned with the social contract. Enhanced awareness of sensation, perception, body feelings, emotion and behavior in the present moment, essentially empathy. This group's goal seemed to be to allow people to live through and by empathy, and disallow any and all of the things that are non-beneficial in what should be a healthy and functioning society. The family structure of Charista was composed of fidelitous groups called BFICs, acronym for Best Friends Identity Clusters. Charistans practice non-preferential polyfidelity. Polyfidelity does require consensus to accept a new person into the group, and that's either man or woman. Non-preferentiality was an important concept of Charistinian polyfidelity, and had lofty goals, but was more intended to keep people from coupling up. Non-preferentiality proved very difficult to achieve. Charistans had a transitional celibacy period after joining a group of 3 months, sometimes waived. A single BFIC was composed of men and women, who rotated sleeping with all of the opposite sex members on a balanced rotational sleeping schedule. The sleeping schedule assigned each family member to sleep with a different opposite sex partner each night. Since the BFICs were rarely balanced between men and women, typically more women than men, on any given night, several family members would have no partner to sleep with and were assigned a 0 night. And that was when they slept alone, unfortunately. In addition to the programmed sleeping schedule, it was permitted to sleep with any opposite sex family member at any time, which was termed a freebie. Not much tolerance for same-sex relationships, I see. Now, the group was disavowed. Conflict between the Abacus Inc., which was a company created by the community. They did supply computer parts, actually. And Charistans spurred some of the ire and a few changes in the lenience of the rules, notably allowing less religious people into the commune and loosening of superfluous rules. Now, Judd, which he was the leader towards the end of the commune, didn't get along well with everyone. Typically, he would end up arguing with some well-known individuals who'd come to document and research the commune. So what can we really learn from this?